Welcome to episode 7 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. Today is November 7, 1964. We're at Goodison Park in Liverpool. More than 43,000 pack the terraces. Breath fogging the air. Leeds United, newly promoted, hard-edged, relentlessly fit, have come to town. What happens over the next 90 minutes will crystallize a nickname that sticks to them for years. Dirty Leeds. Before the whistle, 2 bits of context matter. How discipline worked then, and why everyone in 64 was already on edge. In 1964, there are no cards yet in English football. No calming yellow, no show-stopping red. Discipline is the referee's word and the FA's paperwork afterward. That makes dismissals rarer, and when they happen, they feel like earthquakes through the crowd. And 1964 is already running hot. On February 15 at Highbury, an FA Cup 5th round tie between Arsenal and Liverpool turned nasty. Late challenge, punches, and a double sending off, Joe Baker and Ron Yeats, exiting on 38 minutes. You could feel a new sharpness in English football that spring. Players were getting more fit, marking was getting tighter, pressing happened earlier, and there was more contact across the field. More contact means more collisions, more grudges, and more flashpoints. In the summer of 1964, the FA's in-house magazine, FA News, prints club-by-club discipline tables from the 1963-64 season. Cautions, suspensions, fines. The piece doesn't use the word dirty, and it isn't a splashy name and shame. It's a drab little table in the middle of, frankly, a magazine with limited circulation. But Leeds rank worst on totals. Don Revie, Leeds' coach, bristles publicly. His indignation does what outrage often does. It amplifies. A statistic becomes a chant. By November, the 2 words already echo. Dirty Leeds. This is also the birth era of the mobile away end and the youth culture terrace. Post-maximum wage footballers colliding harder on the pitch and new groups colliding harder off it. Socially, Britain is mid-pivot. Money in teenage pockets, trains to away grounds, and newspapers itching for football in crisis copy. Goodison is a perfect storm waiting to happen. So let's get to the match itself on this day in 1964. Already in the first minute, the tone is set. Billy Bremner crashes into Everton's Fred Pickering. You can hear the inhalation, one of those, "Oh, so it's that kind of day" tackles. 4th minute, it detonates. Sandy Brown, Everton's left back, is sent off for punching Johnny Giles. As he leaves, you can see the stud marks across Brown's own stomach. In 4 minutes, the match has produced a villain, a victim, and an exhibit. Leeds go ahead in the 13th minute. A cross from Bobby Collins, all Fusion Flint, 5'3" of pure aggravation and a former Everton man himself. And Willie Bell heads it in. 0-1. It will stay that way, but not quietly. Later in the half, Everton winger Derek Temple is knocked unconscious in a collision. As Leeds physio Les Cocker tends to him, the coin hail begins. Metal clattering on turf, chants of "Dirty Leeds, Dirty Leeds." The touchline turns febrile, then ugly. Referee Ken Stokes, from Monday to Friday an electrician at a Nottinghamshire pit, makes a near unthinkable call in that era. He takes both teams off the pitch for 10 minutes to cool the place down. No cards to flash, no protocol to lean on, just a man who doesn't want a riot on his watch. Then they all return. The tackles still bite, the needle still pricks, but Leeds' shape holds and their nerve holds too. Everton 0, Leeds 1. On paper, 2 away points for a promoted side now within touching distance of the top of the table. In the public mind, however, proof that the Leeds problem is real. So why did this game shock so much in 1964? Well, it shocked because in a pre-card era, a referee clearing the stage mid-match was borderline unheard of. Because a stretcher scene turned into a projectile scene. Because the FA's dry tables had primed everyone. The February Arsenal versus Liverpool brawl had warmed the room, and Leeds' full-throttle style, fit, organized, relentless, and unapologetically protective, was the perfect lightning rod. It also shocked because Don Revie's Leeds were good, actually. Dirty is easier to pin on winners. Revy's build was modern, dossiers, fitness, comfort camp hotels, and a deep family culture that told creators like Giles, you do the painting, we do the lifting. That meant enforcers in the best sense. Jackie Charlton, Norman Hunter, hard but fair in their self-image, never short of a tackle in reality. And Bobby Collins, a walking accelerant, was right in the middle of everything at Goodison. The FA news tables gave rival crowds a number to chant and gave refs a background hum. Revy went public, we play hard, we don't play dirty, and paradoxically welded the tag on. Opponents started arriving ready for a war. Get your retaliation in first became the pre-match talk. Games went spiky earlier, the loop tightened. So a question is whether violence was rare before the match or whether this was an upswing. Post-war English football always had hardness, mud, leather balls, straight through centre-halves. But the early to mid-1960s produced a noticeable uptick in disciplinary flashpoints. Two drivers. One, tactic and fitness. Zonal ideas and proto-pressing compacted space. Fitter squads closed faster, so skill and steel lived in the same postcode. That raises contact time, which raises collisions. And two, social temperature. Youth culture, mobility, and leisure spending put more organized away followings on trains. Terraces became theatres for local pride and, increasingly, confrontation. February 64, the Baker Yeats send-off, wasn't a blip. It was a marker on a trend line that press could see. So the FA's tables weren't random scolding. They were a bureaucratic way of saying, we're watching the needle climb. Unfortunately for Leeds, they happened to top that table at exactly the moment the public wanted a culprit. The naming and shaming didn't pacify the sport. It created a storyline. Leeds leaned into being formidable, and the rest of the league learned into meeting fire with kindling. The decade that followed was both glorious and combustible. A few waypoints on that arc. The FA Cup final 1965 between Leeds and Liverpool was widely derided at the time as emblematic of method football and attrition, anxieties that sat right on top of the dirty Leeds narrative, fair or not. And speaking of Leeds versus Liverpool, the 1974 Charity Shield gave a tag a new generation. Kevin Keegan and Billy Bremner traded punches, ripped shirts, and earned hefty bans for, as quote was saying, bringing the game into disrepute. It's impossible to overstate how much that single brawl refreshed the brand for the public imagination. And globally, the temperature matched the times. The 1967 Intercontinental Cup between Celtic and Racing, which we talked about in the OTD podcast on November 4th, the so-called Battle of Montevideo, with assaults, mass dismissals, arrests. Yet it got worse in 1969 between Milan and Estudiantes. Nestor Combin finished with a broken face and a night in custody. Estudiantes players got all jail terms and bans. The message: this wasn't just an English thundercloud. The whole football climate was stormy. So what Goodison actually meant is that in an age before cards, Ken Stokes wrote his own law, cool the pot or it boils over. It meant that a coin storm around a stretcher could hit an entire national conversation. It meant that Leeds, fit, organized, tactically modern, became the avatar for anxieties about where the game was going. And it meant something else, the paradox. The more the press called them dirty, the more Leeds were feared, and sometimes admired, for their will, their shape, their refusal to wilt. The label didn't tame them, it hardened them. Meanwhile, crowds did not fall away. They lived for this theatre. England, within 2 years, would host and win a World Cup built on organization, fitness, and collective bite. The very traits that critics claimed were corroding the soul of the game. Dirty Leeds didn't begin as an FA verdict. It began as a feeling, then a chant, then a brand, born on an afternoon when the sport learned just how hot it had become. That's all for the 7th episode of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history about 1964 and Dirty Leeds. Please subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share it with other football-passionate people in your life. And if you have great ideas for an episode, email us at otd@17lawsguide.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Tomorrow, November 8th, we'll dive into a World Cup qualifier between Sudan and Zambia in 1968 and the curious tiebreak rule that sent Sudan through. See you then.